Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into the Iron Age, a time of mist-shrouded forests, clashing bronze, and warriors who wouldn't know what a Wi-Fi signal was if it bit them on there. Well, you get the idea. Imagine, if you will, the cool, damp air of ancient Britain settling around you, the scent of wood smoke from a distant roundhouse clinging to your woolen cloak. You've just been through a bit of a ruckus, a minor disagreement with the folks from over the hill, probably about whose cows are whose, or who gets the best berry-picking spots. And as you're taking stock, something catches your eye on your most prized possession. Now, let's be honest, in this era, your life expectancy isn't exactly stellar. A bad tooth, a poorly aimed spear, or just a common cold could see you pushing up the ancient daisies. You probably won't survive this particular story if it were real life, but luckily, this is just for sleep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really helps the channel grow, and lets me know I'm on the right track with these sleepy little histories. And, as always, I'd love to see where you're all listening from tonight, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Drop a comment below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is still thick with the aftermath, not of a grand battle, but of a scuffle, a hurried exchange of shouts and thuds that resolved little but frayed everyone's nerves. You trudge back towards the relative safety of your settlement's wooden palisade, the muddy track squelching softly under your worn leather boots. Your breath mists in the fading light, and the forest around you seems to exhale a damp, earthy sigh. The adrenaline is ebbing, leaving behind that familiar weariness, a dull ache in your shoulders from wielding your shield and spear. It wasn't exactly the Super Bowl of intertribal disagreements, more like a very aggressive neighborhood watch meeting gone wrong. Still, any encounter could be your last, a truth that settles in your bones like the evening chill. You reach your small, circular hut, the thatch smelling of damp straw and wood smoke. Inside, the embers of a central fire glow faintly, offering a little warmth against the creeping cold. You lean your spear against the wattle and daub wall and unstrap your shield. It's a beautiful piece of work, this shield. Not one of those enormous, purely ceremonial parade pieces like the Battersea shield you might have heard tales of, a stunning piece of Latin art, that one, likely never meant for actual battle but rather for display, perhaps even ritually deposited in a river. Yours is functional, a sturdy disc of beaten bronze, its surface bearing the swirls and triskills common to your people, patterns hammered into the metal with care and skill. These shields were more than just protection, they were a statement, a symbol of your status and your connection to your kin. You carry it over to the weak light filtering through the doorway, intending to give it a quick wipe down. The surface is smeared with mud and a few scuffs, battle stains that speak of its service. As you run a damp piece of wool across its curved face, your fingers tracing the familiar embossed lines, something feels off. A slight catch. You pause, peering closer. The light is poor, so you angle the shield, trying to catch the last rays of the dying sun. And there it is. Your heart gives a little lurch, a cold knot tightening in your stomach. A crack. It's tiny, almost invisible. A hairline fracture, no longer than your thumbnail, starting near the reinforced bronze boss at the center and extending outwards towards the rim. It's subtle, like that one small scratch your mate promised wouldn't be noticeable on your borrowed chariot, but you know it's the beginning of the end if left untended. You run a fingernail over it. Yes, definitely a crack. Not just a surface scratch. It goes deeper. A wave of dismay washes over you. This shield has been your companion through several seasons of minor skirmishes and the ever-present threat of raids. It has deflected spear thrusts, turned aside sword cuts, and absorbed the jarring impact of thrown stones. It's an extension of your arm, your life. How did this happen? You cast your mind back to the brief, chaotic fight earlier. Was it that glancing blow from an axe, The one that skittered off the edge with a high-pitched shriek of metal on metal? Or perhaps the heavy thud of a spear shaft, striking not with its point but with its full wooden weight? You can't be sure. In the heat of the moment, you're focused on staying alive, not on cataloging every impact. Historians still argue whether Celtic warriors typically fought in highly organized phalanxes or relied more on individual prowess and looser formations. Your experience leans towards the latter, a swirling, dynamic affair where your shield was your constant, active partner, not just a passive barrier in a static line. It moved with you, a dance of defense. You sit heavily on a low stool, the shield resting on your knees, its usually comforting weight now feeling ominous. This isn't like a dent in a modern car that you can just ignore or cover with a sticker. This is a critical failure in a piece of equipment that stands between you and a very unpleasant end. A crack, however small, is a weakness. Under the stress of the next blow, it could spread, splitting the shield, leaving you vulnerable at the worst possible moment. You briefly consider just pretending you didn't see it, the ancient equivalent of putting a piece of tape over the check engine light, but your ancestors would definitely judge you for that. Besides, your life quite literally depends on its integrity. The patterns on your shield, those intricate swirls and curves, suddenly seem to mock you. Some believe these designs weren't just for show. There's a quirky, though not widely accepted, tidbit that suggests certain complex Celtic patterns could have had apotropaic qualities, designed to ward off bad luck or evil spirits. Others even whisper that some designs were meant to be optical illusions, disorienting an opponent in the frantic close quarters of a fight, much like modern dazzle camouflage on ships. Right now, though, the only spirit you're worried about is the one that might leave your body if this shield fails. The lament in your heart is genuine. This shield was costly, representing a significant investment of resources and craftsmanship. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, wasn't just lying around for the taking. The raw materials had to be mined, often transported over long distances, smelted, and then painstakingly worked by a skilled smith. Replacing it would be a major undertaking. Repairing it, that's the only viable option. But even that will be a challenge. Bronze is a tricky material. It's not like iron, which can be heated and hammered back into shape more readily. Bronze can become brittle if not handled correctly. You sigh, the sound barely audible above the gentle crackle of the dying embers. The day started with the usual routines, tending to the livestock, checking the perimeter, the mundane tasks of survival. It's ending with this new, unwelcome anxiety. That tiny, almost insignificant crack on your beautiful bronze shield has just become the most important problem in your world. The thought of facing another skirmish, another raid, with this hidden weakness is unbearable. Something must be done. The silence in your hut deepens, broken only by the occasional soft pop from the dying fire. You continue to stare at the hairline fracture, this tiny flaw that has burrowed its way into your peace of mind like a woodworm into an oak beam. It's more than just a piece of damaged kit, it feels like a betrayal. This shield, this beautiful, steadfast circle of bronze, has been with you through so much. It's not just an object. It's complicated. You wouldn't exactly say it has a soul, not like a person or an animal. But it's certainly more than just inert metal shaped by a smith. It's seen your fear, felt the spray of your enemy's spittle, shared in the grim satisfaction of survival. It's as much a part of your warrior identity as the calluses on your hands or the old scar above your eyebrow from that particularly enthusiastic boar. You remember the day you first held it. It wasn't a hand-me-down, nor was it won in battle. It was commissioned, a significant event. You'd proven yourself, shown your worth in the community, and it was time for a shield befitting your growing status. Your kin had pooled resources, a few precious ingots of tin traded from distant shores, perhaps Cornwall or even further, and copper from a local working. The journey of those materials to the smith's forge was a saga in itself, a testament to the interconnectedness of your world, even if you only ever saw your own valley and the next. The bronze, once alloyed and cast into a rough blank, was then painstakingly hammered and shaped. This technique, known as raising, involved countless hours of skillful hammering to thin and form the metal into its dished shape. The intricate Latin-style patterns, those flowing tendrils and spirals that are so quintessentially Celtic, were then worked into the surface using repoussé and chasing, hammering from the back to create raised designs, and then refining them from the front. It's a testament to the artistry of your people, this ability to turn a functional tool of war into a thing of beauty. When the smith finally presented it to you, it gleamed with a warm, reddish gold light, the patterns mesmerizing, the central boss solid and reassuring. It felt alive in your hands, balanced, an extension of your will. It was more than metal, it was potential, a promise of protection. You recall the faint scent of the oil used to polish it, the satisfying weight, the smooth coolness of the bronze against your palm. It was, in a way, like being given a part of your future. Now, looking at this crack, it feels like that future is a little more precarious. You've heard the old tales, the whispers among the elders. Some believe that objects of great significance, especially those associated with life and death, can absorb something of their owner, or of the events they witness. A sword that has tasted much blood might grow eager for more, or a shield that has saved many lives might carry a protective aura. It's a quirky little notion, this idea that inanimate objects can develop a kind of personality. There's a fringe belief, almost a superstition, that a warrior's shield can, over time, soak up not only the impacts of blows but also the warrior's courage, or even the lingering fear of defeated enemies, making it more potent with each passing season. You're not sure you fully subscribe to that, but you can't deny the bond you feel. This isn't just a shield, it's your shield. If it could talk, you imagine it would have a rather dry, seen-it-all wit, probably complaining about the dents you've let it accumulate, like a grumpy old soldier forced back into service one too many times. Replacing it would be unthinkable. Not just because of the cost, but because of the history embedded within its very fabric. Each scratch, each dent, before this worrying crack, of course, told a story. That long scrape near the rim? That was from deflecting a particularly nasty spear thrust during the cattle raid last spring. That cluster of small dings near the boss? Hailstones, believe it or not, during a freak summer storm that caught your foraging party out in the open. You'd all huddled under your shields, feeling like turtles caught in a rock slide, while the sky threw icy pebbles at you. Good times. This shield has been a silent confidant. Before a raid, when the tension is almost unbearable, you found yourself tracing its patterns, the cool metal a steadying presence. In the chaotic heart of a skirmish, its familiar pressure against your arm is a constant, a point of certainty in a world turned upside down. To simply cast it aside because of this flaw would feel like abandoning a loyal friend. Scholars still debate the extent to which Celtic warriors imbued inanimate objects like shields with genuine spiritual agency, or if such reverence was primarily symbolic of their martial identity and lineage. For you, it's less about abstract theology and more about lived experience. This shield works. It has kept you alive. Therefore, it is precious. The idea of repair, then, is not just a practical consideration. It's an act of preservation, of respect. It's about restoring not just its physical integrity but also that intangible connection. A new shield wouldn't know you. It wouldn't have shared those moments of terror and triumph. It would be a stranger, cold and untested. This one, despite its current ailment, is a veteran. It deserves the chance to be made whole again, to continue its service. You wouldn't put down a loyal hound for a slight limp if it could be mended, would you? Well, maybe some would, but not you. Not this hound. You think of the smith. A figure of some importance in any settlement. They are the masters of fire and metal, capable of transforming raw, unyielding materials into tools, weapons, and objects of beauty. Their skills are almost magical to the uninitiated. The repair of bronze is a delicate art. It's not as straightforward as working iron, which can be heated and hammered with a certain robust forgiveness. Bronze can be contrary. Heat it too much, or cool it too fast, and it can become brittle, worse than before. This tiny crack, if mishandled, could spiderweb across the entire surface, rendering the shield useless. The thought spurs you into action. The initial dismay begins to fade, replaced by a quiet determination. This crack will not be the end of your shield story, nor, if you can help it, yours. Tomorrow, at first light, you will take it to the smith. You will explain the problem, show him the almost imperceptible flaw, and entrust your shield, your silent partner, into his capable hands. The repair is essential, not just for your physical survival, but for something deeper, something tied to your identity as a warrior and as a person who values loyalty, even to an object. It sounds a bit daft when you put it like that, loyalty to an object, but in a world where your possessions are few and hard-won, and where those possessions can mean the difference between life and death, such bonds are forged strong. The night passes fitfully. Every creak of the hut's timbers, every rustle in the thatch, seems to echo the unease in your mind. You keep the shield close, propped against the wall beside your sleeping furs, almost as if its proximity offers some comfort, despite its newly discovered flaw. You drift in and out of shallow sleep, images of the crack spreading like a dark vein across the bronze surface replaying in your thoughts. It's like having a splinter you can't quite reach, a small irritation that grows in significance the more you focus on it. You imagine yourself in the next skirmish, the shield failing at a critical moment, the horrifying split-second realization of vulnerability. No, that simply won't do. You need this fixed, and soon. One historical fact that often gets overlooked is the sheer amount of recycling that went on in the ancient world. Metal was precious, and broken tools or weapons were rarely just discarded. They were often melted down and reforged, their essence continuing in new forms. This thought gives you a sliver of hope. If they can melt down entire swords, surely a tiny crack can be managed. As the first gray light of dawn seeps through the smoke hole in the roof and the ill-fitting door flap, you are already awake. The air is cold and damp, carrying the familiar morning scents of wood smoke from rekindled fires and the earthy smell of the animal pens. You chew on a piece of dried meat for sustenance, no time for a proper breakfast of heated leftovers or a bit of coarse bread today. Your mission is clear. You carefully wrap the shield in a piece of woolen cloth, partly to protect it further, partly, perhaps, to hide its shameful little wound from prying eyes until you reach the smith. It feels a bit like taking a sick child to the healer, a mixture of hope and trepidation. You also consider, briefly, the social implications. A warrior with a damaged shield might be seen as careless, or worse, unlucky. Best to keep this low profile. You step out into the nascent morning. The settlement is slowly coming to life. Figures emerge from their roundhouses, sleepy-eyed, cloaks pulled tight against the chill. The sounds are muted, a distant cock crowing, a bird likely introduced by traders from the continent, as domestic chickens weren't originally native to Britain, the lowing of cattle, the murmur of early morning conversations. You nod to a few familiar faces, offering a grunt of greeting that passes for polite conversation before the first mouthful of morning ale, or whatever passes for coffee in your time, probably something bitter and vaguely stimulating brewed from local herbs. Your destination lies on the edge of the settlement, slightly apart from the main cluster of dwellings. The bronzesmith's workshop is often situated this way, partly because of the fire risk, and partly because the noise and fumes aren't exactly conducive to a peaceful domestic life. You trudge along the well-worn path, the wrapped shield held carefully in your arms. It's not overly heavy, as Celtic shields, especially those made of bronze, were generally lighter than the later, larger Roman scuda, designed for agility and dynamic fighting rather than forming a static shield wall. Historians still argue whether the elaborate designs on Celtic shields were purely decorative or if some patterns, particularly those involving red enamel, which your shield doesn't have, but some high-status ones did, held specific symbolic meanings related to tribe, lineage, or even protective magic. As you approach, you can already hear the rhythmic clanging that signals the smith is at work, or at least preparing for it. It's a familiar sound, a sort of metallic heartbeat for the community. The smith, a man named Borvo, a good Celtic name, often associated with healing springs, which is perhaps a good omen for your shield's illness, is not just a mender of broken things. He's a creator, an artist in metal. He makes the tools that till the fields, the axe heads that clear the forests, the brooches that fasten cloaks, and, of course, the weapons that defend your people. His skill is vital, his knowledge passed down through generations, a chain of craft stretching back into the mists of time. You consider what you'll say. You can't just barge in and demand he drop everything for your little crack. He'll likely have other commissions, perhaps more pressing, repairs. There's a certain etiquette to these things. You'll need to be respectful, patient. Maybe offer a small token, a piece of dried fish or a good quality whetstone you traded for last season, as a gesture of goodwill. It's not a bribe, more like an appreciation fee for his valuable time. Like trying to get a plumber on a holiday weekend, but with more at stake than a leaky faucet. The path to Borvo's workshop is usually a bit messy, stray bits of charcoal, discarded metal fragments, though most are religiously saved for recycling, and the odd misshapen lump of slag. It's the detritus of creation. You recall a quirky tidbit you once heard. Some ancient smiths were believed to have a third eye or a special connection to the spirit world, allowing them to understand the secrets of metal and fire. Looking at the transformative power of a forge, turning dull ore into gleaming, useful objects, it's easy to see how such beliefs might arise. Borvo himself is a practical man, not given to mystical pronouncements, but there's an intensity about him when he's working, a focus that seems to shut out the rest of the world. You reach the open-fronted workshop. It's a fairly simple structure, a roof supported by sturdy wooden posts, with one or two walls of wattle and daub to provide some shelter from the wind and rain, but largely open to allow smoke and fumes to escape. The forge itself, a clay or stone hearth, will be glowing soon, if it isn't already. The quest to get your shield repaired has officially begun. You take a deep breath, the scent of cool metal and old fires filling your nostrils. The fate of your shield, and by extension, a good measure of your own safety, now rests on convincing Borvo to take on this delicate task. You hope he's in a good mood. And that he hasn't just run out of the really good, fine-grained charcoal that's best for this kind of delicate heating. The little details matter. You pause at the edge of the workshop, allowing your eyes to adjust to the dimmer interior, even though it's still fairly open. The early morning light casts long shadows, and the air within is noticeably warmer than outside, carrying the distinct, almost metallic tang of cold iron, bronze dust, and the faint, acrid scent of burnt fuel from countless previous fires. It's a smell that speaks of industry and transformation, a place where raw elements are bent to human will. Borvo, the smith, is already there, his broad back to you as he tends to the forge. He's a man built for his trade, stout, with powerful arms and shoulders, his movements economical and precise. He's currently coaxing the embers from last night's fire back to life, adding small pieces of charcoal and working a pair of large, leather-lunged bellows. The forge itself is a raised hearth, perhaps made of clay and stones, with a hood of sorts to help direct some of the smoke upwards, though much of it still eddies around the workshop before escaping into the open air. The workshop is a controlled chaos of tools and materials. Along one wall, various hammers are neatly arranged, their heads showing the marks of long use, ball peen, cross peen, flat-faced sledges of different weights. There are tongs of all shapes and sizes, designed to grip hot metal securely, some with delicate, pincer-like ends, others with robust, gaping jaws. Chisels, punches, and drifts lie on a rough-hewn wooden bench. You spot a collection of anvils, not the massive, perfectly shaped anvils you might imagine from later periods, but more rudimentary affairs, perhaps a large, specially selected smooth stone, or a solid block of iron, if the community is prosperous enough to afford such a luxury for their smith. Historians note that early anvils could be quite simple, even portable, reflecting the often itinerant nature of early metalworkers. Coils of bronze wire, ingots of copper and tin, the essential ingredients for bronze, and piles of scrap metal, broken tools, discarded fittings, offcuts from previous jobs, are stored in various corners, all awaiting their turn to be transformed. This emphasis on recycling is a key aspect of ancient metalworking. Nothing usable was wasted. Remember that story about some Egyptian pharaohs using crocodile dung as a component in their sunscreen? Well, smiths had their own, less fragrant, but equally vital recipes and tricks for working metal, many of which would seem utterly bizarre to a modern metallurgist. You see clay crucibles, some intact, others cracked and discarded, used for melting bronze. There are molds made of clay or stone for casting simple objects. Troughs of water for quenching stand nearby, steam occasionally rising from them if hot metal has recently been plunged in. Though quenching bronze is a different beast to quenching iron or steel, it often hardens bronze, unlike steel which it softens, anneals. Borvo likely uses the water more for cooling tools or controlling temperatures. The entire space hums with a latent energy, a testament to the power of fire and the smith's skill. It's a far cry from your Wallalandab hut. This is a place of elemental forces, carefully managed. Borvo gives the bellows a final, vigorous pump, and a shower of bright orange sparks erupts from the growing heart of the fire. He straightens up, wiping a hand across his brow, though it's still cool in the early morning. He turns, noticing you standing there. His face is smudged with soot, his eyes sharp and observant. He's not a man of many words, especially when focused, but he's generally fair. Warrior, he grunts, by way of greeting. It's not unfriendly, just direct. No time for pleasantries like, fancy seeing you here. Did you lose your way to the turnip field? You nod in return. Smith Borvo. A good morning to you. You hold the wrapped shield a little tighter. Now for the slightly awkward part of presenting your problem. He eyes the bundle in your arms. His gaze seems to linger on it for a moment, as if he can already sense the nature of your visit. Perhaps he can. Smiths develop a keen eye for the way people carry things, especially when those things are broken and precious. He gestures towards a sturdy wooden block that serves as a stool or a small table. What troubles you? Another dent from overenthusiastic sparring? There's a hint of dry humor in his tone. He's seen his share of warriors bringing in their battered gear, often with sheepish expressions. You walk over and carefully place the wrapped shield on the block, then begin to unwrap it, feeling a bit like you're unveiling a rather embarrassing rash. The woolen cloth falls away, revealing the burnished bronze, its intricate patterns still catching the faint light. You turn it so the tiny crack is visible. Not a dent this time, Borvo. Something more insidious. You point to the hairline fracture near the central boss. This appeared after yesterday's disagreement over the ridge boundary. Borvo leans closer, his expression serious now. He squints, his eyes, accustomed to peering into the fierce glow of the forge and discerning the subtle changes in heated metal, easily finding the almost invisible line. He runs a calloused finger over it, much as you did, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man who routinely batters metal into submission. The silence stretches for a moment, filled only by the soft hiss and crackle of the awakening forge. You find yourself holding your breath, waiting for his verdict. It feels like a consultation with a renowned surgeon, one who holds the power to heal or to deliver a grim prognosis. This isn't just a workshop, it's an ancient emergency room for injured metal. and you're fervently hoping your shield isn't about to be declared DOA. Borvo straightens up, his gaze still fixed on the tiny crack, though you suspect his mind is already cataloging the potential complexities of the repair. He makes a soft, thoughtful sound, a low hum deep in his chest. It's the sound of a craftsman contemplating a problem, weighing variables, accessing a mental library of techniques and past experiences. You've seen your grandmother make a similar sound when inspecting a bolt of newly woven cloth for flaws, a universal sign of expert scrutiny. He says, the single syllable carrying a wealth of meaning. It's not a hum of dismissal, nor one of immediate alarm, but rather one of careful consideration. A crack, and right there by the boss. Tricky spot. He taps a finger near the reinforced central dome of the shield. The metal here is often under different stresses, especially if the boss was raised significantly or attached with too much force. He picks up the shield, his large hands surprisingly deft as he turns it over and inspects the reverse side. The back of a Celtic shield isn't usually as decorated as the front, but it's crucial for its structure, featuring the handle and often reinforcing elements. He's looking to see if the crack is propagated through, or if there are any telltale signs of stress on the interior surface. Was it a direct hit, do you think? Or a torsion, a twist? You try to recall the chaotic moments of the skirmish. It's hard to say for sure. There was a heavy blow, felt more like a club than a blade, landed near the center. Could have been that. You feel a bit like a patient trying to describe symptoms to a doctor, vague recollections, hoping they make sense to the expert. Borvo nods slowly. Bronze can be fickle, he states, echoing your own earlier thoughts. It doesn't always give warning before it fractures, especially if it's work-hardened unevenly. He explains, in simple terms, how repeatedly hammering bronze to shape it, like in the raising process, makes it harder but also more brittle in those areas. If not annealed properly, heated and cooled to relieve these stresses, it can develop weak points. It's a mainstream historical fact that understanding annealing was crucial for Bronze Age and Iron Age smiths. Without it, many bronze objects would have been too fragile for practical use. He places the shield back on the wooden block, front side up. This crack, it's small now, he says, tracing its path again with his fingertip. But it's like a seed. Leave it, and it will grow with every impact, every flex. Eventually, he makes a sharp, spreading gesture with his hands, a clear illustration of the shield splitting apart. And that would be inconvenient for you. Understatement of the Iron Age, right there. Inconvenient like a surprise visit from a hungry bear during dinner. He then shares a quirky tidbit about bronze. Some old smiths used to say that bronze has a memory. If it's been stressed or damaged before in a certain way, even if repaired, it's more likely to fail in the same area or manner again unless the memory is properly erased through careful heating and working. It's not scientific in the modern sense, of course, but it speaks to the intuitive understanding these craftsmen had of their materials. It's almost as if they're personifying the metal, trying to coax it into behaving. The challenge, Borvo continues, his voice thoughtful, is to repair this without weakening the surrounding metal. Too much heat in one spot, and you risk making the area around the crack brittle. Not enough, and the repair won't hold. And bronze doesn't weld like iron. You can't just heat two edges to glowing and hammer them together. He outlines the basic problem. You can't easily fuse bronze back to itself in the same way you can forge weld iron. Historians still argue whether true forge welding of bronze was ever a common or reliable technique in antiquity, with most evidence pointing towards mechanical joints, like riveting, or forms of brazing/soldering for repairs and construction. This crack is too fine for a simple mechanical patch without being unsightly and potentially creating new stress points. So, what can be done, you ask, trying to keep the anxiety from your voice? You're pinning a lot of hope on this man and his ancient, smoky workshop. You feel a bit like you're waiting for a pronouncement from an oracle, except instead of cryptic prophecies, you're hoping for a practical solution involving fire and hammers. Borvo doesn't answer immediately. He walks over to his collection of tools, picks up a small, pointed instrument, perhaps an awl or a scriber, and returns to the shield. He gently probes the very ends of the crack, his touch feather light. First, we'd need to stop it spreading. Sometimes, drilling a tiny hole at each end of the crack can do that. It distributes the stress. This technique, known as stop drilling, is still used today in modern engineering to prevent cracks in metal and other materials from propagating further. It's a simple yet effective principle. He then looks at the overall condition of the shield, aside from the crack. It's a good piece, he says, a note of professional appreciation in his voice. Well made. The patterns are crisp. Good thickness, not too heavy. You've taken care of it. This small piece of praise, coming from him, means a lot. It's like getting a nod of approval from the head chef after he's tasted your soup. It's saved my hide more than once, you reply. I'd rather not replace it. Replacement is expensive, Borvo says, stating the obvious, but with a sympathetic understanding. And a new shield is an unknown quantity. This one has proven itself, crack notwithstanding. He seems to share your sentiment that there's more to this shield than just its material composition. Finally, after what feels like an age of deliberation, he looks up at you. It can be repaired, he says. But it will take time and care. And no guarantees it will be as strong as it once was, right on that spot. But it will be better than a crack waiting to spread. A wave of relief washes over you, so profound it almost makes your knees weak. He didn't say no. He didn't say it was hopeless. There's a path forward. The diagnosis is in, and it's not terminal. Now, the delicate surgery can begin. Borvo's pronouncement that the shield can be repaired hangs in the air, a welcome reprieve. The forge continues its soft, breathy hiss, a counterpoint to the relief settling in your chest. You're not out of the woods yet, or rather, your shield isn't, but at least there's a path through them. Now, the practicalities begin. This isn't like dropping off your boots with the cobbler for a new sole and picking them up later. This will be a process, and you sense Borvo expects your involvement, or at least your understanding. So, what's the first step, you ask, eager to see the healing commence, even if it's just the preliminary stages. You're trying not to hover like an anxious parent in an emergency room, but it's hard. This shield is, after all, your mental baby. Borvo gestures towards the shield. First, and most importantly, the area around the crack must be scrupulously clean. Absolutely pristine. Any dirt, any grease, any lingering trace of, well, whatever it encountered out there, he says, with a slight, knowing glance that suggests he's seen shields come in caked with all sorts of battlefield detritus, will interfere with the repair. It could get trapped in the join, create weakness, or prevent the new metal from bonding properly. He walks over to a cluttered bench and rummages around, producing a few items. The first is a small, stiff-bristled brush, possibly made from boar hair or a tough plant fiber. Next, he selects a piece of fine-grained sandstone, worn smooth on one side from previous use, and then a small, rather unassuming lump of what looks like dried clay. He also has a pot of water nearby. We start with the basics, he explains, returning to the shield. A good scrubbing to remove any surface grime. He dips the brush in the water and begins to gently clean the area around the crack, his movements methodical. He's not just wiping it, he's working the bristles into the nearly invisible crevices of the bronze surface, dislodging tiny particles of dirt and dried mud that you hadn't even noticed were there. It's a surprisingly delicate operation for such a robust-looking man. He probably uses the same gentle touch when he's fishing a particularly stubborn splinter out of his own thumb, another common workshop injury. After the initial wash and wipe down with a piece of clean wool, he picks up the piece of sandstone. Now, for the finer cleaning. We need to abrade the surface slightly, right up to the edges of the crack, and a little way beyond. This will remove any oxidation, the green tarnish that bronze naturally acquires, and give us fresh, clean metal for the repair to adhere to. He begins to rub the sandstone gently around the crack, using a circular motion. The sound is a soft, rhythmic shush-shush, a dry whisper against the metal. You can see a faint metallic dust appearing as he works. This meticulous surface preparation is critical. A mainstream historical fact is that proper cleaning and removal of oxides are essential for successful soldering or brazing in any era, ancient or modern. Without it, the filler metal simply won't flow or bond correctly. It's the equivalent of sanding down a piece of wood before you glue it. Skip that step, and your join will be weak. Borvo pauses, inspects his work, then continues. He's being careful not to remove too much material, just enough to expose the bright, untarnished bronze beneath the patinated surface. Some smiths, he remarks, without looking up from his task, use a harsher abrasive, like crushed emery or even fine sand mixed with water. But for a fine crack like this, on a decorated shield, I prefer a gentler approach. We don't want to scar the surrounding patterns. You appreciate his consideration. It would be a shame to fix the crack only to create a new eyesore of scratches. He then picks up the lump of dry clay. This is one of those quirky, fringed tidbits of ancient technology. This, he says, holding it up, is a special kind of clay, very fine. Some call it polishing clay or scouring earth. When mixed with a little water to make a paste, it acts as a very mild abrasive and also helps to degrease the surface. He crumbles a bit of it into his palm, adds a few drops of water, and works it into a smooth paste. He then applies this paste to the area around the crack and rubs it in with his fingers, then with a piece of soft leather. This is like the ancient version of using a specialized metal polish or a degreasing solvent. It's amazing how effective these simple, natural materials can be when used with skill and knowledge. Historians still argue whether some of these fine clays, often referred to as fuller's earth in later contexts, though primarily for cleaning wool, might have had slightly different mineral compositions that made them particularly effective for specific tasks like metal polishing. The exact recipes and preferred local materials of ancient artisans are often lost to time, pieced together from archaeological finds and educated guesswork. Finally, after several minutes of this careful scouring and polishing, Borvo rinses the area thoroughly with clean water and dries it meticulously with another piece of fresh wool. He inspects it closely, angling the shield to catch the light. The area immediately around the crack now gleams with a slightly brighter, fresher bronze hue compared to the more aged patina of the rest of the shield. It looks almost surgically clean. There, he says, with a note of satisfaction. The wound is clean. Ready for the next stage. He seems pleased with this initial preparation, and you have to admit, the area looks completely different, ready for whatever magic he's about to perform. It's a small step, perhaps, in the grand scheme of the repair, but a fundamentally important one. Without this meticulous cleaning, any subsequent efforts would be compromised. It's like a surgeon scrubbing in before an operation, a non-negotiable prerequisite for success. The mundane, often overlooked tasks are frequently the bedrock upon which more dramatic achievements are built. And right now, your shield's future rests on this perfectly cleaned patch of bronze. With the area around the crack now gleaming and impeccably clean, Borvo steps back for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. The initial, almost ritualistic, cleansing is complete, and now the more technical considerations come to the fore. He regards the shield with a focused intensity, his gaze flicking between the tiny fissure and his array of tools. This is the point where he truly earns his keep, moving beyond simple cleaning to the complex decision-making of a master craftsman. It's like a chess master contemplating the board, seeing several moves ahead. You almost expect him to start muttering to himself, weighing options aloud, but Borvo is more of an internal processor. Now, he says, breaking the silence, his voice low and contemplative, we consider the method. How best to seal this breach without creating new problems? He gestures towards the crack. It's fine, but it's a through crack. It goes all the way. That influences our choices. He begins to outline the possibilities, almost as if thinking aloud for your benefit, or perhaps just to organize his own thoughts. One option, he begins, pointing to a collection of small bronze rivets and a delicate-looking hammer and punch set, is to use a tiny rivet. Or perhaps several, if the crack were longer. He explains that this would involve drilling a small hole, or perhaps two, one at each end of the crack as he mentioned earlier, to stop it spreading, and then carefully inserting a custom-made, tiny bronze rivet. The rivet would then be peened, hammered, flat on both sides, effectively clamping the cracked edges together. Riveting is strong, he concedes. It's a good mechanical join. We use it often for attaching handles, or reinforcing rims. Many Celtic shields, particularly those with applied decorative plates or complex boss constructions, relied heavily on riveting. A mainstream historical fact is that riveting was a fundamental Bronze Age and Iron Age joining technique, used for everything from cauldrons to helmets. But, he adds, a note of caution in his voice, for a crack this fine, on the face of the shield, a rivet head, no matter how small and carefully smoothed, will be visible. It might also create a slight bulge, or new stress points around the rivet itself if not done perfectly. And drilling holes, even tiny ones, is removing metal. He looks at you. It would be functional, but perhaps not the most elegant solution for a shield such as yours. You appreciate his aesthetic sensibility. While function is paramount, preserving the beauty of the shield is also important to you. You don't want it looking like it's had emergency staples put in by a battlefield medic with a heavy hand. Another way, Borvo continues, his gaze shifting towards the forge, where the fire is now burning with a steady, controlled heat, is to try and flow some new bronze into the crack. A form of soldering, or perhaps closer to brazing, given the temperatures we might need. He explains that this would involve using a bronze alloy with a slightly lower melting point than the shield itself. This filler metal, when molten, could be drawn into the cleaned crack by capillary action, and upon cooling, would form a solid bond. This method, if successful, could make the repair almost invisible, he says, and your heart gives a little leap of hope at that prospect. The new bronze would fuse with the old, filling the gap completely. However, he quickly adds a caveat. But it's more difficult. Controlling the heat is critical. The shield itself must be heated, at least locally around the crack, to allow the filler metal to flow properly and bond well. Too much heat, and you risk melting or distorting the shield itself, or making the surrounding area brittle. Too little, and the bond will be weak, a cold shut we call it, where the metals don't truly fuse. This sounds like a high-wire act, requiring immense skill and judgment. It's the ancient equivalent of micro-soldering a circuit board, but with a much bigger, hotter iron. He then mentions a third, less likely option for this specific situation. If the damage were larger, say a hole or a more significant tear, we might consider a patch. He points to some scraps of thin bronze sheet. We could cut a small piece of bronze, shape it to cover the damaged area, and then rivet or solder it in place. But for a hairline crack like this, a patch would be excessive. Like using a cartwheel to mend a tear in your tunic. You nod in agreement. That seems like overkill, and would definitely spoil the look of the intricate patterns. Historians still argue about the precise terminology and differentiation between soldering, brazing, and welding in ancient contexts, as the temperatures and alloys used don't always fit neatly into modern definitions. What is clear is that ancient smiths possessed sophisticated techniques for joining metals using filler materials and controlled heat. Borvo falls silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the tiny crack, as if it holds the answer. You can almost hear the cogs turning in his experienced mind. He's weighing the risk of a visible but mechanically sound rivet against the potential for an almost invisible but technically more challenging solder or braze. He considers the thickness of the shield at that point, the proximity to the intricate chased patterns, the type of stresses that area is likely to endure in future unpleasantries. He then shares a quirky, almost philosophical tidbit that seems to guide his decision. Sometimes, the metal tells you what it needs. You listen to it. A big, crude tear might shout for a strong rivet. A delicate break like this, it whispers for a more subtle healing. You find this strangely comforting. He's not just applying a one-size-fits-all solution, he's tailoring his approach to the specific injury. After a long pause, he looks up, his decision made. Soldering, or a fine braze. That is the way for this one. It's riskier, more demanding of skill, but if it works, it will be the best result. It will disturb the beauty of your shield the least. He adds, with a wry smile, and it will test my old eyes in steady hands. You feel a surge of gratitude. He's choosing the more difficult path, the one that prioritizes not just function but also form. It's a testament to his pride in his craft. I trust your judgment, Borvo, you say, and you mean it. His confidence, even with the acknowledged risks, is reassuring. The path is chosen. Now, the delicate dance with fire and molten metal will begin. Now that Borvo has decided on the delicate path of soldering or brazing, the preparations shift to a new phase. The meticulous cleaning was crucial, but now the focus turns to the materials for the repair itself, and the heart of his workshop, the forge. He needs to select a suitable piece of bronze to act as the filler metal and then bring his fire to the precise temperature required for the task. This isn't like throwing a few more logs on a campfire, it's a controlled, almost alchemical process. First, Borvo says, gesturing towards a corner piled with various scraps of bronze, we need the right kind of bronze for the filler. It must have a melting point slightly lower than the shield itself, so it flows into the crack before the shield decides to become a puddle. He chuckles softly at his own grim humor. You manage a weak smile. The image of your prized shield melting into an amorphous blob is not one you care to dwell on. And it needs to be compatible, good quality bronze. No impurities that could weaken the join. He begins to rummage through his scrap pile. This isn't just a random assortment of junk to him, it's a carefully curated library of metallic potential. He picks up a thin, broken brooch, examines it, then discards it. Too much lead in this alloy, I think. It would make it flow easily, but the join might be too soft. He sifts through offcuts from sheet bronze, fragments of old fittings, even a twisted piece of what might once have been a decorative torque. Each piece is assessed with a knowing eye. A mainstream historical fact is that Bronze Age and Iron Age smiths were adept at creating different bronze alloys for different purposes by varying the proportions of copper and tin, and sometimes adding other elements like lead or arsenic, though arsenic was more common in earlier bronze periods for its hardening properties, before tin became widely available and understood. Finally, he selects a small, unassuming piece of clean, bright bronze, perhaps an offcut from a previous high-quality casting or a piece of sheet that he knows to be of good composition. This should do, he declares. Good, clean metal. It should flow well and make a strong bond. He takes this chosen piece over to a small, flat stone anvil and, with a light hammer, begins to beat it thinner, drawing it out into a very fine rod or a narrow strip. This will make it easier to introduce into the tiny crack. It's like he's preparing a delicate surgical instrument from raw material. While he's occupied with preparing the filler metal, your gaze drifts to the forge. It's currently burning with a steady, orange-yellow flame, the charcoal glowing brightly. Borvo now turns his attention fully to it. The fire needs to be just right, he says, almost to himself. Not a raging inferno for forging iron, but a more persuasive heat. Gentle, but hot enough. He takes a long iron poker and carefully rearranges the glowing coals, creating a small, concentrated hot spot. He then adds a few select pieces of high-quality charcoal, not the dusty remnants, but denser, well-burned pieces that will provide consistent, controllable heat. He works the bellows again, not with the vigorous pumping he used earlier to bring it to life, but with a more measured, rhythmic action, carefully observing the color of the flames and the glow of the coals. He's looking for a specific hue, a particular intensity that his experience tells him is correct for this delicate work. It's a skill honed over years, an intuitive understanding of combustion and heat transfer that no textbook could teach. He's like a master chef adjusting the flame under a delicate sauce, knowing that a few degrees too high or too low can spell disaster. You recall a quirky, slightly unnerving tidbit. Some ancient cultures believed that the success of metallurgical processes, especially those involving valuable or sacred metals, depended not just on the smith's skill but also on appeasing the spirits of the fire and the earth. While Borvo seems far too pragmatic for such overt rituals, there's a reverence in his movements as he tends the forge, a deep respect for the power he's about to unleash. Perhaps it's not so much about spirits as it is about a profound understanding of natural forces. We won't put the shield directly in the main fire, Borvo explains, noticing your attention. That would be too harsh, too difficult to control for such a localized repair. We need to heat the area around the crack gently and evenly. He gestures to a section of the hearth near, but not directly in, the hottest part of the fire. We'll use the radiant heat, and perhaps some carefully placed hot coals, to bring the shield metal up to temperature slowly. He then prepares a sort of small, makeshift oven or baffle using a few flat stones and pieces of broken crucible, arranging them around the spot where the shield will be heated. This will help to concentrate the heat and protect the rest of the shield from getting too hot. It's ingenious in its simplicity, a low-tech solution to a high-tech problem. The forge, now carefully managed, seems to breathe with a controlled power. The air in the workshop grows warmer, and the smell of hot metal begins to intensify, mingling with the scent of the burning charcoal. The preparations are nearly complete. The filler metal is ready, a slender sliver of bronze. The forge is a focused point of intense, yet managed, heat. Borvo has orchestrated these elements with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra, each component playing its part. Historians still debate the exact temperatures achievable in ancient forges and the level of control smiths had, but finds of intricately brazed or soldered artifacts prove they could achieve remarkable finesse. Borvo gives one last adjustment to the coals, then straightens up, his expression one of focused readiness. The hearth awakens, its breath now primed for the delicate task ahead. The stage is set. The next step will involve bringing the shield itself into this carefully prepared environment of controlled heat, a critical and nerve-wracking part of the process. With the filler metal prepared and the forge radiating a carefully controlled heat, the critical moment approaches. Borvo turns his attention back to your shield, which still rests on the wooden block, its cleaned area gleaming faintly. The atmosphere in the workshop seems to have intensified, the usual clangs and bangs of a smithy conspicuously absent. There's a focused silence, broken only by the soft sigh of the bellows and the gentle crackle of the charcoal. Even you find yourself holding your breath slightly, a spectator to a delicate operation. Now, we warm the patient, Borvo says, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of concentration. He carefully picks up the shield, his movements betraying none of the object's true weight. He handles it as if it's made of fragile glass rather than sturdy bronze. This isn't about brute force, it's about finesse. He doesn't thrust the shield directly into the flames. Instead, He positions it near the carefully arranged stones and hot coals he'd set up on the periphery of the forge. The side with the crack is angled towards the heart of the fire, but not touching it. He intends to use the radiant heat, that invisible shimmer you can feel on your skin even from a distance, to slowly and evenly raise the temperature of the bronze around the fracture. Slow and steady, he murmurs, more to himself than to you. Bronze doesn't like surprises. Shock it with too much heat too quickly, and it can warp or, worse, develop new stresses and tiny internal fractures that you won't see until it's too late. This gentle, even heating is vital. It will expand the metal slightly, potentially opening the crack a minuscule amount more, making it more receptive to the molten filler. More importantly, it will reduce the thermal shock when the hotter, molten solder is applied, ensuring a better bond. It's like warming a cold glass before pouring hot water into it to prevent it from shattering. He rotates the shield slightly from time to time, ensuring the heat is distributed as evenly as possible around the damaged area. He's not just guessing. His experienced eyes watch for subtle changes in the color of the bronze, though at these lower preheating temperatures, the visual cues are minimal. He might even be judging it by feel, briefly wafting his hand over the surface to gauge the temperature, a dangerous game for the uninitiated but second nature to him. You imagine his calloused hands are less sensitive to heat than yours, but he still possesses an acute awareness of its effects. It's a far cry from the precise digital pyrometers of a modern workshop, relying instead on years of accumulated sensory knowledge. This preheating stage is crucial. A mainstream historical fact in metallurgy is that preheating the base metals is often essential for successful brazing or soldering, especially with thicker materials or those with high thermal conductivity like bronze. It prevents the filler metal from cooling too quickly upon contact, allowing it to flow properly and wet the surfaces of the join. After a few minutes of this careful warming, Borvo nods, seemingly satisfied with the shield's temperature. Good, he says. Now, a little closer, a little more direct heat, but still gentle. He adjusts the shield's position, bringing the area of the crack a bit nearer to the glowing coals, perhaps even allowing some of the less intense flames to lick gently at the surface. He's constantly observing, his focus absolute. You see him squint, perhaps looking for that first hint of a subtle color change that indicates the bronze is approaching the right temperature range for the solder to flow. He then employs a rather ingenious, quirky technique. He takes a sliver of what looks like dried grass or a thin wooden splint and briefly touches it to the shield, some distance away from the crack. It smolders and blackens instantly. He's using organic material as a rudimentary temperature indicator. Different materials combust or char at different temperatures, and an experienced smith would know these signs. It's like an ancient, disposable thermometer. Historians still argue about the full range of such folk methods used by ancient craftsmen to gauge temperatures, as these were often unwritten trade secrets. The metal around the crack now begins to take on a slightly duller, less reflective appearance, a subtle sign that it's hot enough. Borvo doesn't want it to glow red. That would be far too hot for this operation and would likely damage the shield's temper or even risk melting the surrounding area. He's aiming for a temperature that is hot enough for the solder to melt and flow, but well below the melting point of the shield itself. It's a delicate balance, a narrow window of opportunity. The air around the forge is thick with heat now, and the faint, sharp scent of hot bronze is more pronounced. You can feel the warmth on your face even from where you stand, a respectful distance away. Borvo himself seems impervious, his attention locked on the shield and the fire. He's in his element, a master orchestrating the dance of heat and metal. He glances at the slender rod of filler bronze he prepared earlier, then back at the shield. The moment is approaching. The shield is warm, receptive. The metal around the crack has softened, metaphorically if not literally, ready to accept the healing touch of new bronze. The gentle, persuasive heat has done its work, preparing the way for the join. This careful warming, this patient application of controlled heat, is the unseen foundation upon which the strength of the repair will be built. Without it, the finest solder, the most skilled hand, would likely fail. The shield is now perfectly warmed, the bronze around the crack imbued with a subtle, even heat. Borvo, with an almost imperceptible nod of satisfaction, signals that the preparatory heating phase is complete. The real artistry, the heart of the repair, is about to begin. He picks up the thin rod of filler bronze he meticulously prepared earlier, holding it with a pair of small, delicate tongs. His other hand hovers near the bellows, ready to make minute adjustments to the airflow and thus the forge's heat, if needed. The atmosphere in the workshop is taut with anticipation. You find yourself leaning forward slightly, trying to absorb every detail of this ancient, intricate process. It's like watching a surgeon about to make the first incision, a moment of pure, focused intent. Now, for the joining, Borvo murmurs, his voice low. He carefully brings the tip of the bronze filler rod towards the heated area of the shield, specifically to one end of the tiny crack. He doesn't jab it in, instead, he holds it just above the surface, allowing the radiant heat from the shield and the nearby coals to begin warming the very tip of the rod. This is where his immense skill truly comes into play. He needs the tip of the filler rod to become molten, but not so molten that it drips uncontrollably. And he needs the shield surface, right at the crack, to be at the perfect temperature to accept this molten metal, allowing it to flow into the fissure like water into a narrow channel. It's a delicate dance of temperatures. He then uses a long, thin iron poker, its tip heated to a dull red in a hotter part of the forge, not to melt the solder directly, but as a localized heat source. He expertly brings this heated poker close to the filler rod and the crack, providing a little extra, precisely directed heat right where it's needed. This allows him to control the melting of the filler bronze with incredible accuracy, almost drop by drop. It's a bit like using a miniature, superheated soldering iron, but one powered by the raw heat of the forge itself. You watch, fascinated, as the very tip of the bronze filler rod begins to shimmer, then liquefy, forming a tiny, glowing bead of molten metal. With a minute movement, Borvo touches this bead to the crack. For a heart-stopping second, nothing seems to happen. Then, as if by magic, the molten bronze disappears, wicked into the hairline fracture by capillary action. It flows like a tiny, incandescent river, filling the void. Borvo slowly draws the filler rod along the length of the crack, repeating the process, heating the tip, touching it to the fissure, and watching the molten metal flow in. He's not using a hammer yet. This isn't about forcing the metal. It's about coaxing it, persuading it to join. The preheating of the shield is paying off now, as the molten filler doesn't solidify instantly upon contact but remains liquid just long enough to penetrate the full depth of the crack. A mainstream historical fact is that successful brazing or hard soldering relies on this capillary action, where the molten filler metal is drawn into the tight space between the parts to be joined, creating a very strong bond when it cools. Borvo works with incredible patience, his breathing steady, his hands unwavering. Each touch of the molten filler is precise. He's essentially painting with liquid metal, filling the tiny void. If the crack were wider, he might have used a different technique, perhaps laying a thin strip of bronze along it and heating the whole assembly until the strip melted and flowed. But for this fine fracture, this targeted application is perfect. He pauses occasionally, withdrawing the filler rod and the heated poker, to visually inspect the progress, his eyes narrowed against the glow. He might add a tiny pinch of what looks like powdered flux, perhaps borax, or some other mineral compound known to ancient smiths. Flux is crucial in such operations. It helps to clean the metal surfaces further, prevents oxidation during the heating process, and aids the flow of the molten filler. Remember how Borvo meticulously cleaned the crack? The flux is like a final chemical scouring at high temperature. The exact composition of ancient fluxes is often a subject of scholarly debate, as recipes varied and were closely guarded secrets. You can see the cracks slowly disappearing, being filled inch by painstaking inch with the new, glowing bronze. It's a mesmerizing sight, this act of healing metal. It's almost organic, like watching a wound close up. The air is filled with the sharp, metallic scent of superheated bronze and the fainter, slightly acrid smell of the burning flux. This isn't a quick process. Borvo takes his time, ensuring each section of the crack is properly filled. Rushing now would compromise the entire repair. He works with the focused intensity of an artist, adding the final, crucial brushstrokes to a masterpiece. You realize this isn't just a mechanical repair, it's a restoration. He's not just plugging a gap, he's trying to make the shield whole again, both in strength and spirit. Finally, after what seems like an eternity but was probably only a few minutes of intense concentration, he reaches the other end of the crack. He applies one last touch of molten bronze, ensuring the fissure is completely filled from end to end. He withdraws the filler rod and the heated poker, his work with the molten metal done. The tiny, once ominous crack is now a thin, slightly raised line of still glowing bronze, a scar of new metal seamlessly integrated into the old. The joining is complete. The shield hasn't been hammered yet, not in the sense of shaping, but the crucial act of introducing and flowing the new metal has been achieved through delicate taps of heat and material, not forceful blows. The next steps will be about securing and refining this join. The glowing line of freshly flowed bronze solder now traces the path of the former crack, a bright, miniature river against the duller heat haze of the surrounding shield metal. The most delicate part of the operation, the introduction of the molten filler, is complete, but Borvo's work is far from over. The repair, while filled, is not yet fully secured or integrated. It's like a suture that has closed a wound, but still needs time and care to truly become part of the healed tissue. Borvo carefully moves the shield slightly away from the direct radiant heat of the forge, though he keeps it in the warm ambient air of the workshop. He doesn't want it to cool too rapidly. He sets down the tongs that held the filler rod and picks up a small, lightweight hammer with a smooth, slightly domed face, a planishing hammer, or something very much like it. He also selects a small, polished steel stake or dolly, which he holds in his other hand. Now, he says, his voice still low and focused, we encourage the metals to become better acquainted. He's referring to the process of lightly hammering the still hot, freshly solidified solder. This isn't the heavy, forceful hammering used for forging or shaping, but a series of very light, precise taps. He positions the small, polished stake on the reverse side of the shield, directly underneath the repaired crack. This provides support and a firm surface against which to hammer. Then, with the small, smooth-faced hammer, he begins to tap gently along the line of the repair on the front of the shield. The sound is a soft, almost musical tink-tink-tink, very different from the robust clanging you usually associate with a smithy. Each tap is carefully placed, overlapping slightly with the last. This process, known as peening or planishing, serves several purposes. Firstly, it helps to consolidate the solder, pressing it firmly into any remaining microscopic irregularities of the crack and ensuring there are no hidden voids or air pockets. Secondly, it helps to relieve any minor stresses that might have built up in the solder as it cooled and solidified. Thirdly, it begins the process of smoothing the repair, blending the slightly raised bead of solder more flush with the surface of the shield. And finally, this light hammering can also work harden the solder slightly, increasing its strength and durability. It's a bit like gently massaging a strained muscle to help it recover, firm but not aggressive. Borvo works his way along the length of the repair, his hammer blows light and controlled. He's watching the metal intently, observing how it responds to each tap. If he were to hit too hard, he could thin the shield metal unduly or distort the surrounding area. Too soft, and the solder might not fully consolidate. It's another demonstration of his profound feel for the material. He's essentially cold working the solder while it's still hot enough to be malleable but cool enough to have solidified. Well, perhaps warm working is a more accurate term. You notice he pays particular attention to the very edges of the solder line, where it meets the original bronze of the shield. He wants to ensure a smooth, seamless transition, not a distinct ridge or step. This will not only look better but will also be stronger, reducing the chance of the repair catching on something or creating a new stress concentration point. This careful finishing of edges is a hallmark of good craftsmanship. A mainstream historical fact about ancient metalworking is that peening and planishing were common finishing techniques for both decorative and functional items. It helped to smooth out hammer marks from raising or forging, harden surfaces, and refine shapes. Think of the beautifully smooth surfaces on some Bronze Age helmets or cauldrons. Many would have achieved that finish through meticulous planishing. As he works, Borvo might occasionally pause, allow the area to cool slightly more, then resume his gentle tapping. He's controlling the cooling rate even as he works the metal. He doesn't quench it in water. That would cool it far too quickly and could make the bronze brittle, especially the newly introduced solder. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? While probably not effective for sun protection, it highlights how ancient peoples used what was available. Similarly, smiths developed these nuanced techniques for metal based on observation and generations of experience, not from scientific treatises. After several minutes of this careful, rhythmic tapping, the line of solder begins to look less like a raised bead and more like an integral part of the shield's surface. It's still visible, of course, due to the slightly different color and texture of the newly worked metal, but it's much smoother, much more blended. The crack, as a physical void, is now well and truly sealed. The tiny gap that caused you so much anxiety is now filled with solid, consolidated bronze, hammered into place with a craftsman's precision. Borvo runs a calloused finger over the repair. He nods slowly, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. That should hold, he says. The new metal is well seated. The edges are blended. He's not one for effusive self-praise, but you can tell he's pleased with how this critical stage has gone. Historians still debate the exact strength achievable with ancient brazing and soldering techniques. But archaeological examples of repaired items that clearly saw further use suggest that these methods could be remarkably effective and durable when performed skillfully. The repair is now structurally sound, the once vulnerable crack filled and secured. The shield is no longer compromised in the same way. The next steps will focus on aesthetics, making the repair as visually unobtrusive as possible, and, crucially, allowing the shield to cool completely and correctly. But the fundamental act of sealing the breach, of making the shield whole again at that point of failure, is complete. The tiny hammer, with its delicate taps, has worked its quiet magic. With the crack now filled, the solder consolidated, and the immediate area of the repair secured, Borvo turns his attention to the next critical, yet deceptively simple, phase, cooling. This might seem like a passive step, just letting the shield sit until it's no longer hot, but in the world of metallurgy, especially with bronze, how an object cools is just as important as how it's heated and worked. Rushing this stage could undo all the careful work that has gone before. Borvo carefully lifts the shield from its position near the forge. The area of the repair is no longer glowing, but it's still very hot, radiating a considerable warmth that you can feel even from a few feet away. He doesn't plunge it into the water trough. That would be a catastrophic mistake for bronze in this state. Rapid quenching from such a temperature would induce thermal shock, creating immense internal stresses. This could cause new cracks to form, perhaps even more severe than the one he just mended, or it could make the entire area around the repair incredibly brittle and fragile. It would be like taking a piping hot glass dish straight from the oven and tossing it into a sink full of ice water, a recipe for shattered disappointment. Instead, he carries the shield over to a quieter, cooler corner of the workshop, away from the direct heat of the forge and any drafts. He lays it gently down on a bed of dry sand or perhaps a pile of old, clean sacking. This provides a soft, insulating surface and allows the air to circulate freely around the shield, promoting even cooling. Now, patience, Borvo says, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of a sooty forearm. Bronze needs to cool slowly, in its own time. This allows the internal structure of the metal, the grains, to settle properly. It relieves the stresses we introduce during heating and working. He explains that this slow, natural cooling process is a form of annealing, which for bronze generally results in a softer, more ductile state, less prone to cracking. This is somewhat counterintuitive if you're used to thinking about iron and steel, where quenching often hardens the metal. Bronze behaves differently. A mainstream historical fact is that the controlled cooling of bronze artifacts was essential for achieving the desired mechanical properties. Smiths would have understood, through experience, that different cooling rates produced different characteristics in the final product. For some applications, they might have wanted a harder bronze, for others, a more malleable one, and the cooling process was a key variable they could manipulate. Borvo might even cover the shield loosely with another piece of sacking or a thin layer of ash. This isn't just to keep dust off it, it's to slow the cooling process down even further, insulating it from the cooler ambient air of the workshop and preventing one part from cooling significantly faster than another. Uneven cooling is a prime cause of warping or internal stress. He's essentially tucking it into bed to rest and recover from its ordeal by fire. You watch the shield resting in its sandy bed. There's nothing dramatic happening now, no flames, no hammering, just the slow, silent dissipation of heat. It's a period of quiet transformation. The molecules within the bronze are rearranging themselves, settling into a more stable, less stressed configuration. It's a bit like the cool-down exercises you're supposed to do after strenuous physical exertion. It helps prevent injury and allows the body to recover properly. Your shield is having its spa day, its deep tissue massage at a molecular level. The quirky, almost superstitious aspect of this comes to mind again. Some ancient traditions held that during this cooling phase, the spirit or essence of the metal was resettling, and it was important not to disturb it. Loud noises or sudden movements were sometimes avoided near a cooling piece, lest they startle the metal and cause flaws. While Borvo is unlikely to subscribe to such beliefs overtly, his careful handling and the quiet respect he affords the cooling shield suggest an intuitive understanding that this is a delicate and important phase. He doesn't just toss it aside and move on to the next job. Historians still argue about the specific knowledge ancient smiths had regarding the microstructural changes occurring in metals during heating and cooling. They wouldn't have known about crystal lattices or grain boundaries in the modern scientific sense, but their empirical observations over generations led them to develop highly effective practices. They knew what worked, even if they couldn't always explain why in terms we use today. You realize this period of waiting is also a test of your own patience. You're eager to see the final result, to have your shield back in your hands, whole and strong. But you understand that this slow cooling is non-negotiable. Borvo certainly isn't going to rush it. He might turn to another small task in the workshop, tidying his tools, preparing for his next job, or perhaps just taking a well-deserved drink of water. But his attention will periodically return to the cooling shield, monitoring its progress. The minutes stretch by. The intense heat radiating from the shield gradually lessens. The slight shimmer in the air above it subsides. The metal slowly returns to a temperature where it can be safely handled. This might take a considerable time, perhaps an hour or even longer, depending on the initial temperature and the mass of the shield. There's no set timer. Borvo will know it's ready when it feels right, when the residual heat is gentle enough not to pose a risk to the metal's integrity or his fingers. This patient waiting is an integral part of the craft, a quiet interlude between the drama of the forge and the satisfaction of the finished work. It's a reminder that not everything can be rushed, that some processes demand their own time, their own unhurried rhythm. The strength and resilience of the final repair depend just as much on this slow, gentle return to equilibrium as they do on the heat of the fire or the skill of the hammer. After what feels like a small eternity, punctuated by the routine sounds of the workshop gradually resuming as Borvo attends to other minor tasks, sharpening a tool, sorting through some scrap, perhaps taking a moment to stretch his back. Smithing is hard work. After all, he finally approaches the now cool shield. He extends a calloused hand and lightly touches the surface near the repair, then the repair itself. Satisfied that it is cooled sufficiently and evenly, he nods. The period of patient waiting is over. Now, the final stages of the repair can begin, the aesthetic work of polishing and blending the mended area. "All right," Borvo says, his voice carrying a note of anticipation for this finishing touch. "Let's see how well our patient has recovered, and then make it presentable again." He carefully lifts the shield from its bed of sand or sacking. The metal is cool to the touch, its ordeal by fire now a memory embedded in its structure. The repaired area, where the solder was peened and smoothed, is visible. It's a slightly different color than the surrounding aged bronze, perhaps a little brighter or with a slightly different hue depending on the exact composition of the filler alloy he used. The texture is also a little different, bearing the subtle marks of the light hammering. While the crack is gone and the area is structurally sound, it's not yet seamlessly integrated into the shield's overall appearance. It's like a healed scar that is still new and noticeable. Borvo takes the shield over to his workbench, where a selection of finishing tools and materials are laid out. He first inspects the repair closely, running his fingertip over it, checking for any slight unevenness or rough edges that might have been missed during the peening stage while it was still hot. If he finds any minor imperfections, he might use a very fine file or a piece of smooth, hard stone to gently level them. This isn't about removing significant amounts of material, just refining the surface. The goal now, he explains, is to make this repair as unobtrusive as possible. We want to blend it in, so it doesn't draw the eye, and so it matches the wear and patina of the rest of the shield as much as we can. This is where the craftsman becomes an artist, concerned not just with strength but also with beauty and harmony. He begins the polishing process, using a series of progressively finer abrasives. He might start with a piece of fine-grained sandstone, similar to what he used for the initial cleaning but perhaps even smoother, or a piece of worn leather charged with a bit of sharp sand or crushed pottery, a kind of ancient sandpaper. He rubs the repaired area gently, his movements circular and even, gradually smoothing out the very subtle texture left by the peening hammer. He's careful not to abrade the surrounding original surface too much, focusing primarily on the solder line itself and the immediately adjacent metal. After this initial smoothing, he moves to an even finer abrasive. This could be a paste made from very fine clay, like the scouring earth he used before, or perhaps powdered charcoal mixed with a little water or oil. He applies this with a piece of soft wool or leather, rubbing vigorously. This stage starts to bring up a shine on the newly repaired area. A mainstream historical fact is that ancient metalworkers had access to a variety of natural abrasives and polishing agents, from different grades of sand and stone to plant-based materials like horsetail rushes, which contain silica, and even animal products like bone ash. Their ability to achieve highly polished surfaces on bronze, as seen in surviving mirrors and finely decorated artifacts, attests to their skill in this area. As he polishes, Borvo frequently stops to wipe the area clean and inspect his progress. He's looking at the way the light reflects off the surface, comparing the sheen of the repaired area to the rest of the shield. It's a slow, iterative process. He might spend a considerable time on this, as achieving a good blend takes patience and a keen eye. He's not just trying to make it shiny, he's trying to match the existing character of the shield. You might recall hearing a quirky tidbit about how some ancient warriors meticulously polished their shields not just for appearance, but in the belief that a highly reflective surface could dazzle or disorient an opponent in bright sunlight. While the primary purpose of Borvo's polishing here is to blend a repair, the resulting gleam is an inevitable and not unwelcome byproduct. A shiny shield is a proud shield. Finally, for the last stage of polishing, Borvo might use a technique called burnishing. He takes a very smooth, hard tool, perhaps a piece of polished agate, a specially shaped piece of bone, or even a hardened steel implement if he possesses such a refined tool, and rubs it firmly over the repaired area. Burnishing doesn't remove material like an abrasive does. Instead, it compresses and smooths the very surface of the metal at a microscopic level, creating a very high, lustrous shine and also slightly hardening the surface layer. It's like ironing the metal smooth. As he burnishes, the repaired line, once a slightly duller or different colored mark, begins to take on a gleam that more closely matches the aged patina of the shield. The color difference might still be there if you look very closely, as new bronze will always look slightly different from old, weathered bronze, but the transition is much softer, the surface texture now harmonious. He's not trying to make it invisible, or repair is part of an object's history, but he's making it an integrated part, not a jarring flaw. Historians still debate the exact tools and techniques used for the finest levels of polishing and burnishing on ancient bronzes, particularly for high-status items. The mirror-like finishes achieved on some Celtic bronze mirrors, for example, are a testament to a sophisticated understanding of finishing processes. Borvo steps back, holding the shield up to catch the light from the workshop entrance. He turns it this way and that, his critical eye scanning the surface. The repair is still discernible if you know where to look, a subtle witness to the shield's recent trauma and careful mending, but it no longer shouts its presence. It has become a quiet testament to survival and renewal. The bright gleam of the burnished repair is a small beacon of newness on the ancient, storied surface of your shield. The shield gleams softly in Borvo's hands, the repaired area now polished and burnished to a smooth, subtle finish. It looks whole again. The scar is there, a thin, almost imperceptible line that speaks of its recent wound in meticulous healing, but it no longer looks like a point of failure. It looks like a story. But the visual inspection, however satisfying, is not the final test. The true moment of truth is yet to come, a gentle, physical assessment of the repair's integrity. Borvo, ever the pragmatist, knows that beauty is one thing, but strength is paramount for an object like this. He turns to you, a serious expression on his face, though his eyes hold a quiet confidence. "It looks well," he says, his voice betraying a hint of pride in his work. "But the proof is in its heart, not just its skin. We need to see if it holds true. This is the part that makes your own heart beat a little faster." After all this careful work, this painstaking process of cleaning, heating, joining, and polishing, the shield now faces its first, albeit gentle, test. Will the repair hold? Or will there be some subtle sign of weakness, a faint creak, a tiny movement that indicates the bond isn't as perfect as it appears? Borvo doesn't intend to subject it to a full-blown stress test, of course. He's not going to take a hammer and bash it, nor will he try to bend it in half. That would be foolish and could damage even a perfectly sound shield. The test is more subtle, designed to detect any minute flaws or weaknesses in the newly repaired area. It's like a doctor gently palpating a healed limb, checking for tenderness or instability. He positions the shield securely, perhaps bracing one edge against his leather-aproned hip and holding the other edge firmly in his powerful grip. His thumbs are placed on the front surface, on either side of the repaired crack but not directly on it. Then, with a slow, controlled pressure, he applies a slight flex to the shield. He's not trying to deform it permanently, just to introduce a small amount of controlled stress across the mended area. You watch, transfixed. The workshop is silent again, save for the distant, everyday sounds of the settlement. Borvo's brow is furrowed in concentration, his head tilted slightly as if he's listening as much as he's feeling. He's attuned to the shield, waiting for any tactile or auditory feedback. Would a tiny click or a faint grating sound betray a flaw in the sawdust bond? Would he feel a minuscule give, a sponginess, that indicates the joint isn't as rigid and solid as it should be? He holds the pressure for a moment, then slowly releases it. He shifts his grip slightly and applies another gentle flex, perhaps in a slightly different direction, testing the repair along its entire length. His movements are incredibly controlled, born of long experience. He knows just how much pressure to apply, enough to test the joint, but not so much as to risk damaging the shield anew. It's a delicate balance between thoroughness and caution. A mainstream historical fact is that ancient artisans, lacking modern non-destructive testing equipment like X-ray or ultrasonic scanners, relied heavily on such skilled sensory assessments, listening for telltale sounds, feeling for minute movements, and visually inspecting for any signs of distress in the material. Their senses were their most important diagnostic tools. He then taps the shield gently near the repair with his knuckle, listening to the resonance. A sound shield, like a well-cast bell, should have a clear, solid ring. A flaw, like a hidden crack or a poorly bonded joint, might produce a duller, flatter sound, or a slight buzz. This is an ancient and surprisingly effective method of quality control. Remember how you might tap a melon in the market to judge its ripeness? This is the metallurgical equivalent. After a few more such gentle flexes and taps, Borvo pauses. He runs his fingers over the repaired area one last time, feeling for any change, any slight distortion or opening of the seam. He looks at it closely, examining it from different angles. The silence stretches. You find you've been unconsciously holding your breath again. It's like waiting for the judge's scores after a perfect gymnastic routine. You hope, you believe, but you need that final confirmation. Then, a slow smile spreads across Borvo's soot-smudged face. He looks up at you, and there's a genuine warmth in his eyes. Solid, he declares, the single word resonating with quiet triumph. It holds. The bond is good. The metal sings true. A wave of immense relief washes over you, quickly followed by a surge of gratitude. The repair is a success. Not just visually, but structurally. Your shield, your loyal companion, is truly whole again. That tiny, almost invisible crack that had caused you so much worry is now a sealed memory, a testament to the skill of the smith and the resilience of good bronze. He then offers a quirky, almost affectionate pat to the shield's surface, like one might pat a loyal hound that has recovered from an illness. She's ready for more arguments over ridge boundaries, he says, a twinkle in his eye. Though perhaps try to avoid letting axes get quite so familiar with her in the future. You can't help but grin. Sage advice, indeed. Historians still debate the full range of finishing and testing procedures employed by Celtic smiths, as much of this craft knowledge was passed down orally. However, the enduring quality of many surviving artifacts, including repaired items, suggests a very high level of practical understanding and rigorous, if unwritten, quality control. The moment of truth has passed, and the verdict is good. The repair has been tested, gently but thoroughly, and found sound. The anxiety that had gnawed at you since discovering the crack finally recedes, replaced by a quiet satisfaction and a renewed sense of security. Your shield is not just a pretty face, it's ready to do its job once more. Borvo holds the shield up to you, handle first. The burnished bronze catches the light filtering into the workshop, its surface alive with the intricate lateen patterns that swirl and interlace, now seamlessly incorporating the faint, silvery line of the repair. It's a beautiful sight, not just for its artistry, but for what it represents, restoration, resilience, and the quiet triumph of skilled craftsmanship over decay and damage. Your shield is reborn. You reach out and take it, your fingers closing around the familiar grip of the handle on the reverse. The weight feels right, balanced, comforting. It no longer feels like a liability, a secret weakness you carry into danger. It feels like an extension of your arm again, a steadfast guardian. You run your other hand over the front surface, across the spot where the crack had been. It's smooth, solid. If you didn't know exactly where to look, you might even miss the repair, so skillfully has Borvo blended it. It's a testament to his mastery. A sense of deep contentment settles over you, a quiet joy that warms you from the inside out. This shield is more than just a tool, it's a part of your history, your identity. To have it whole again, strong and ready, is a profound relief. Your pride in it, perhaps slightly dented by the discovery of the flaw, is now fully restored, perhaps even enhanced by the knowledge of the care and skill that went into its mending. It's like having a favorite old coat patched by an expert tailor. The repair itself becomes part of its character, a mark of its long service and your dedication to preserving it. It is, "Good, Borvo," you say, the simple words carrying the weight of your gratitude. "Better than I had hoped. You have my deepest thanks." You had brought a small offering, as you'd planned, a string of dried, smoked fish, a delicacy from a river further south, and a good, sharp flint blade you'd napped yourself. You offer these to him now. A small token, for your exceptional skill and time. Borvo accepts your offering with a nod of appreciation. "The fish will be welcome at my table, warrior. And a good flint is always useful." He doesn't make a fuss. His reward is also in the work itself, in the satisfaction of a job well done, a problem skillfully solved. This exchange is part of the fabric of your community, the mutual reliance on specialized skills, the barter and trade of goods and services. A mainstream historical fact is that while coinage existed in some parts of Iron Age Britain, especially later in the period and closer to the continent, many transactions, particularly at a local level, would still have been conducted through barter or the exchange of valuable commodities. You strap the shield to your arm, the familiar pressure a welcome reassurance. It feels right. It feels ready. You flex your arm, move the shield, reacquainting yourself with its balance. It's as if a weight has been lifted from your shoulders, a nagging worry erased. You're ready again, not just for the mundane tasks of daily life, but for whatever challenges the unpredictable world outside your settlement's palisade might throw at you. Whether it's a foraging expedition into the wild woods, a patrol along the disputed boundary, or, heavens forbid, another actual skirmish, you'll face it with your trusted shield whole and sound. You glance around Borvo's workshop one last time, the glowing heart of the forge now banked a little, the array of tools resting silently, the scent of hot metal and charcoal lingering in the air. It's a place of transformation, where the mundane and the damaged are made new and powerful. You have a newfound appreciation for the smith's art, for the quiet alchemy he performs. Borvo gives you a final nod. Go well, warrior. And try to keep her out of too much trouble. There's that dry humor again. I'll do my best, Smith, you reply, a smile on your face. But she is, after all, a shield. Trouble is her business. With a final gesture of thanks, you turn and step out of the dusky workshop into the brighter light of the day. The world looks a little different now, sharper, more defined. The vague sense of vulnerability that had clouded your thoughts is gone. Your shield, reborn from its tiny affliction, feels like a renewed promise of protection. The intricate patterns on its surface seem to gleam with a renewed vigor, the Celtic swirls and triskills a vibrant dance of form and function. That quirky idea about shields absorbing courage? Maybe there's something to it. Or maybe it's just the confidence that comes from knowing your equipment is sound. Either way, you feel more prepared, more complete. You walk back towards your own dwelling, the shield on your arm no longer a source of anxiety, but a symbol of resilience. The tiny crack, once a threat, is now a story etched in bronze, a reminder that even the strongest things can falter, but with care and skill, they can be made whole again. Your warrior's heart is content. Your shield is ready. And so are you. The soft glow of the forge has faded now from our tale, and your own hearth, or perhaps just the gentle hum of your fan, is lulling you deeper into the quiet of the night. The Celtic warrior, with his newly mended shield, steps back into the mists of his time, his anxieties soothed, his confidence restored. That tiny crack, once a source of such profound worry, has been transformed by skill and patience into a mere memory, a testament to the enduring human desire to repair, to restore, to make whole again what was broken. And as you drift, letting the story settle around you like the evening mist in that ancient forest, perhaps you can feel some of that same gentle restoration in your own mind. The cares of your day, the little cracks and stresses that accumulate in the course of modern life, can perhaps be smoothed and soothed by this journey into a simpler, though no less challenging, world. The rhythmic tap of the smith's hammer, the soft hiss of the forge, the patient work of careful hands, these are the sounds of creation and renewal, ancient echoes that still resonate with a deep sense of peace. Allow your breathing to slow, to deepen, like the bellows of Borvo's forge sighing into rest. Let your muscles relax, like the bronze of the shield cooling in the quiet corner of the workshop, all stresses gently ebbing away. There are no more battles to fight tonight, no more repairs to be made, only the soft embrace of sleep, the quiet mending of mind and body. The shield is whole. The warrior is content. And you, too, can find that sense of completeness, that gentle peace, as you surrender to the encroaching drowsiness. Let the last images of the burnished bronze, the glowing embers, and the misty Celtic landscape fade into the soft darkness behind your eyelids. Rest now. Sleep well,